Okay, so Tony Holler, I'm glad to have you back. And you've actually been my remote speed coach for the past 3 months. And I've just had such a great experience with this program. And I want to get into some of the things I found with that program, some things that really shocked me. And the first thing I want to start off with is that first workout that I did. So I was preparing to go back to play soccer in an adult league. And I hadn't played soccer in, I think, 6 years was my last competitive game, and I've just been doing strength training, and I've had no sprint training since that last game, and going into that first workout, I thought I was going to be really sore, but the next day, I felt fantastic. And I was like, "Okay, that's a little bit weird," but at the same time, I kept hearing you say in my head, "Well, tired and sore are the enemy, and they're not the goal with speed training." So, do you wanna just expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think your first question here is like my central message. So much so that my book, if I ever get it published and get it done and everything, is called "Tired is the Enemy," and it's a revolution because traditional sports, tired was the goal. If a coach did not get an athlete physically exhausted, then they were not getting enough out of them. They weren't teaching them toughness, uh, fortitude, all the things that make us better at life. Was thought to be really hard work, embracing the grind, being okay with being miserable and not feeling good. Speed training flips that, which I think is such a healthy thing that when we say we only train when fresh, I think it causes our brain to start thinking, what do I have to do to be fresh? Which you could insert healthy instead of fresh and say, what do I have to do to be healthy? Which is something that you're all about. You want healthy athletes, you want healthy human beings. So that first workout is sometimes you do wake up sore the next day because you're doing things you haven't done. And everybody's experience is slightly different. But what you did on that first day was a 15-minute workout, but it only included 60 seconds of work, which in itself is mind blowing. Like, what? And so the fact that you felt good the next day, I believe, creates the want to do it again. I just heard, who was it? Brad Stolberg. I just read his book, Groundedness. Please, everybody, read Brad's book, Groundedness. Beautiful book. And he even talked about the process of being a writer, that you should never write until you're tired. You should write until you're on fire, like you're really on a roll, and quit there because you're more apt to can't wait to do it again. And when you do it the next day, you pick up where you left off on a roll, on this momentous inertia where you're moving forward. And yeah, I could do an hour-long speech on this whole idea, but the idea that you were excited and felt good the next day really bodes well for your future workouts.
That's so true. I think I would have quit then and there if I couldn't walk the next day.
Yes.
And I would have felt that I wasn't making progress. I would have felt, "Oh, this is really defeating. I don't feel like this is doing anything for me." And another thing I did notice was I didn't just feel good the next day, I felt good that same day. So I always did my workouts in the morning because that's when I'm fresh, I feel at my best, I'm fueled from breakfast properly, and after that workout, the first thing in the day, I felt so awake and alert and energized the rest of the day. And I felt like I was really creative and I could
Mm.
focus more. And it was just super fascinating for me because I had never really felt that from a running or sprinting workout in the past.
Now, were you caffeinated before working
A,
out?
a little bit,
A little
yeah.
bit. And I actually encourage that because
Mhm.
it's such a neurological thing that you want to be any type of neurological boost. I think is positive. And if you think about all the things you just said, it's been known forever that movement is one of the keys to a successful life. Every author, and I study people who write, every author I've ever heard of finds that walking is the greatest thing in the world for ideas. You feel better after the walk than you did before. Walking might be the most underrated, that and sleep, the two most underrated things in the human existence. And if one of my key things in Feed the Cats is that if you train the extreme, you train the entire range. I don't know of anything more extreme movement wise than sprinting as fast as you can sprint. So if there are gains to be made by walking, just imagine the gains that could be made from sprinting, which is far more neurological. I feel caffeinated, or I don't sprint enough. True confession here. I'm still a jogger. But my kids, I think, feel caffeinated after a workout. And that's just a joyful thing for me to see after living, I was a coach's kid, living through an entire life of seeing of seeing kids crawl off the floor or the field or the track, that they were literally physically devastated at the end of a workout, and coaches high-fived on that, like, yeah, we're doing our job. So that's the flip. That's the revolutionary approach of this tired is the enemy. And I think I totally agree with you. You probably had hours of energy after a workout.
Mhm. Yeah, I did, and I really enjoyed starting my day with the workouts, and what I also enjoyed was that it was the same workout for a couple months. And I like that because it was good to create those habits and to get that stimulus back into my life and to really master the movements. And that's one thing I see a lot of parents of youth soccer players push back on is they want the program to constantly change. They want the drills to be advanced and for them to progress like super quick, but they don't stay consistent with the basics or starting with the first square one of the program. And I get frustrated because with speed it's something that really needs to be cultivated because of it how advanced of a skill it is. So can you just speak to why it's important to keep the program fairly similar and get that down for a couple months, especially with youth?
Yes, I think there's a couple things. Man, there's a lot of things there. I think that just the nature of our society in our modern world, we want things to come fast. I talk to professional, elite trainers and people that, one guy that last weekend, Les Spellman, who trained 18 NFL draft picks last winter, 6 first-round draft picks. Brian Kula, who trains Christian McCaffrey, and these guys, when parents of like 12-year-olds come into their facilities, they're upset sometimes that there's too much standing around.
Mhm.
That the parents want constant movement and constant work because that's what we've been fed all of our life. But the problem with constant movement, constant work is that outputs are diminished. You can't run as fast if you don't recover. The other thing they want is exactly what you talked about, and that is they want advancement into complex things. If they see the creation of habits, they see that as, what am I paying for here? This looks too repetitive to me. And that goes to John Wooden's 8 laws of learning, which I state all the time, which is the first law is you explain, and then you demonstrate, and then you allow imitation. And then it's repetition, 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 repetition. And people are too impatient these days to allow for repetition. I believe a baseball player needs to hit a baseball 10,000 times. I mean, are we going to start doing advanced drills or something? Or are we going to do what matters? And I think sprinting is such a fundamental of all sports that you have to start being repetitive. You have to create a habit. And of course, the atomic workout that I gave you, the idea of that came from another book that everybody has to read. It's called Atomic Habits. And you don't form habits by having 2-hour workout sessions. You form a habit by doing the minimal effective dose. Create the habit, want more, like you did, and then become more and more optimal once that habit is established. And you are exactly right. In our impatient world, parents would rather not pay for that. So they end up paying for charlatans. They're just doing stuff to make money instead of improve the athlete.
That's so true, and those are usually the people who tend to program hop, and after
Oh,
just a month, they just are like, "Well, this isn't working for me." But those are the people who haven't stuck with the 2 to 3 times a week of getting their sprint workouts in, and it's frustrating because after these 3 months of doing these workouts with you and just doing 15 minutes twice a week, and then the last month, I bumped it up to 3 times a week, my miles per hour number, it's soared in just that small amount of time, and I just can't repeat enough how powerful it is, especially for youth too, who've never been exposed to this stimulus. They're going to see that miles per hour number improve a lot quicker, right?
yes, and it is. I say the speed grows like a tree, but when
Mhm.
you're timing and record ranking and publishing your times, and you stay focused over an 8-week period, you will see gains. And
Mm.
I here's a question for you. Many people report back to me, especially people as they're aging and so forth, that they actually feel younger as they get faster.
100%. I was just gonna say, I felt like I was in better shape than when I was a college All-American.
Isn't that something? I'm
And
like,
now I'm in my 30s, I just turned 33, so it's like, yeah, I feel very healthy and powerful too.
yes,
Mm.
and I use the Dylan quote. I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now, and I don't
Yeah.
think it was such a beautiful paradox of a statement. But I think that, or as Tom Petty says, "Never slow down, never grow old." I don't think he practiced that. I don't think he lived a real healthy life. But it's a great quote, and I think that if we would not have been sold this jogging craze 50 years ago, and would have been sold a feed the cats craze 50 years ago, I think we would have been a healthy, younger generation.
Mm.
But like I said, I just got back from a long run because that's what I was sold. And those are the habits that I created back in the 70s. And those habits are hard to break. Now, if I could go back, I would do what I prescribe to people like you, to sprint in very short doses. And I would argue that 15-minute atomic workout is a lot more fun than a 3-mile run.
100% is. And you look forward to it way more, but the one thing that kinda got me, and I started to notice myself getting a little impatient, was the rest time between the 10-meter flies, and I understand why it's 5 minutes and or more, and maybe you can get into that, but I found myself at, like, the 2-minute mark. I was like, "Oh, I wanna go again."
You
But
feel
then
fun.
I was like, I really want to make sure my time on that second set is very similar to my time on the first set, and I cannot do that if I rest 1 to 2 minutes. So I was like, I'm just gonna enjoy the sun and looking at the willow trees in my neighborhood and just
Mhm.
get that 5-minute rest. And then on that second set, I was flying and it felt great and the times were similar. So, can you just get into the importance of that long rest time and why most sprint workouts, when you look at them from the outside in, a lot of us are just going to be standing around?
Yes, and what it is, it's really biochemical. I'm an old chemistry teacher at the cell level. Some of you probably have a vague remembrance of ATPs. ATPs is um, that's the currency of energy in our cells. Well, you can feel mentally, physically, physiologically fine after a minute or so, after a 5-second sprint. And basically, no matter how, if you're ever getting to top speed, it's a 5-second sprint. And so you need 1 minute per second of sprinting. Now, you don't need that to feel good again. You don't need that to do it again, but you won't be as fast. And so like I train about, in the off season, I train about 30 kids, and I'll train them today. And there will be a young kid or something that they'll run a 10-meter fly or a 40-yard dash, and they'll walk back, and I see they're running again right away. And I'm just like, okay. And then they run and they're like 2 miles an hour slower. And they're like, what? Gee whiz. I'm like, because my kids either swear or they celebrate after every time, which that's what we want. Not necessarily the swearing, but yeah. So anyway, I say, okay, Antonio, that's what happens if you don't take 5 minutes rest. And he goes, oh, okay. Like if you were rested 5 minutes, you might have beat your first time. And the thing about you looking at your willow trees in your yard and stuff, one of the things as coaches we forget is that many of the best memories of sports were not the actual activity. It was the bus rides. It was the sitting around after practice. It was the community feeling that you had with your teammates. And it was the talk and the bonding and all those things. So like if you were working with a group, you might feel even less antsy about that next one because you're talking to people. You're having that down moment that we all really appreciate. Just that feel of being together as a team and all that kind of stuff. So it goes against everything we've been taught as coaches and teachers. Keep them busy. If you don't keep them busy, there's going to be trouble. But when you keep them busy, it turns into busy work. And we all know what busy work is. It's filler. And that doesn't make us better. It might make it easier to manage, but I don't think we're there to manage kids. I think we're there to coach them. So yeah, I think that's a real good take that you have about kind of the frustration that we have with downtimes.
Mhm. Yeah, it seems like during those sprint breaks, even when you are with the group, everyone's like, "Wait, should we be doing something right now?" But then, as a coach, you can just lead that and be like, "Hey, this is our time to socialize and like make jokes or whatever." And then it just becomes more fun of a session. And then when you do run that second set or that third set of your sprints, then you're ready to go. And I think that's so important for people to just remember. And honestly, it's tough, and I think we're still fighting that constant busyness during our sessions, especially like for us youth performance coaches. Like sometimes parents are watching and they're looking at you and they're like, well, why is my 12-year-old standing around for 40 minutes? This isn't what I'm paying for. But their goal is speed. They want their kid to get fast, so we can't go against what their goal is just to please them and make the session look crazy. So that's one thing I noticed. And then another thing was with the mile per hour number, I was really competitive with myself, and I wanted to keep improving that. And what I've been finding in the soccer community especially is no one is tracking that number. And you'll see coaches even tell their players in like yearly player reports, "Oh, well, you need to improve your speed." But there was no measurement given. So it's like, how do you know that player needs to improve their speed? Do you know what they're running at? And a lot of new soccer players that come to me, middle schoolers, high schoolers, they're running less than like a 50 mile per hour. It's pretty dreadful to
It
see.
is.
And it's like the fact that you don't know that mile per hour number is insane to me. And the fact that your coach is telling you you need to improve when they're not measuring, that's also a little insane. So, do you have anything to say about that getting that
Oh,
mile per hour number and how critical it is?
100%. Lacrosse is similar to soccer, about half the volume, but still it's one of those sports where everybody wants speed, but nobody's measuring it. Nobody's trying to, they recruit it, but then they don't do anything about it. And Princeton, for example, is now feeding the tigers. It's a form of feed the cats, obviously, where they are tracking miles per hour. And when you do that, you improve it.
Mhm.
They started with 3 guys at 20 miles an hour. Now they have a year later they had 17. Matter of fact, they had 3 guys at 22 miles an hour
Mm.
after 1 year of doing this work. Oh, and lo and behold, 18 years, first time in 18 years, they make the Final Four. And now your old alma mater, Johns Hopkins, the men's lacrosse team is now feeding the Jays, and the S&C coach isn't an S&C coach anymore. They call him an S&S coach, strength and speed.
Mm.
And so this speaks to the problem in soccer. And one of the things, that exact workout that you started with, that atomic workout, one of the first things you said was that you felt energized afterwards. What that is a neurological, I call it your nervous system's on fire in a good way. And so you are ready for high output things, whether it's writing, working, whatever. So I don't like calling it a warm up, because warm up usually is something long and hard, slow, and makes you sweaty. I call it a potentiator. A potentiator is things that improve the next thing you do. So I say that speed potentiates the weight room. What that means is, if you do that 15-minute atomic workout, your weight room numbers will be better because of that sprint workout. It does not work the other way around.
Mhm.
Weights do not potentiate speed, but speed, because it's neuro and the weight room's not, speed is the perfect potentiator for the weight room. And this is what I would argue, is that you could use that atomic workout to replace that long, slow, awful warm up that most soccer teams do. Yes, it would take more than 15 minutes because you got more than one person doing it. Maybe it takes 25. But what you get is 2 mile per hour times
Mhm.
a couple times a week. You are working on speed. You're practicing something that's not natural, which is uh, sprint mechanics. It's not natural. You have to practice it. It's 15. Well, let's say it took you 25 minutes to do a atomic workout that led into soccer practice, but that 25 minutes still only has 60 seconds of work. So nobody's tired.
Mhm.
Everybody's potentiated. Everybody's nervous system is like, bring it on, baby. Well, that is the perfect lead in to soccer practice. So you could develop speed, measure speed, and improve your soccer practice by adding a brief speed workout before the soccer practice itself. And then I would also argue that you need to stop doing stuff at the end of practice that ruins the next day. The
Mhm.
grueling conditioning type stuff that kind of counteracts everything you're trying to do.
I'm glad you mentioned the warm up because that's another thing. I started to rethink my stance on the traditional light to moderate soccer warm up that we've been doing since the 90s.
Mhm.
And you go to any youth soccer tournament and you see girls doing just these awful high knees. They're not even high knees, they're just kind of like trotting. And when you do a high knee drill in the atomic workout, you are high output just 5 seconds.
Yep.
So I started to rethink my stance on the traditional soccer warm up and starting to consider the idea that you just mentioned of prescribing this speed workout before soccer practice and getting that speed stimulus, improving performance, and also to some extent reducing chance of injury.
Amen.
Would you agree with
100%.
that?
Oh my goodness. We just completed probably the best sports performance clinic in the world, I swear to God. Last 3 days in Chicago. And me and Chris Corfus, we host it every year. And someday you're going to speak at it. And the everybody says that exact thing. And that is that we are afraid to sprint because of injury. And so we get injured in games. But if we would get accustomed to sprinting, it almost becomes, it's a bad word these days, but like a vaccine. Like
Mhm.
we are inoculated against speed-based soft tissue injuries. The Denver Broncos this year have had their season ruined by 11 hamstring injuries. When 55 guys have, when 11 of the 55 have a hamstring injury, you're doing something wrong. And I would almost always predict that it is a lack of that sprint stimulus in off-season training and in general training, like maybe doing it in a warm-up instead of doing worthless 30 minutes of getting tired, that would prevent injury. And then of course there's, like you said, there's so many other benefits.
Mhm.
If you're timing, you got to track those times. I believe that speed is the best barometer of the health of an athlete you could possibly do. So if you have uh, an 18-mile-an-hour girl, which is that girl's recruitable. I mean, that's
Mhm.
fast. Okay, if you have an 18-mile-an-hour girl and she comes in on Monday running 16, you need to have a talk with her. Let's find out what's wrong. If you have an entire team that's 2 miles an hour slow, then you got to have a talk with yourself. What are we doing to detrain the type of movement in our sport that wins? Walking and walking and jogging does not win soccer games. It's the high outputs that do.
Mhm.
And so you should not be training that those 8 miles of just moving around. You should be training those 12 times in a soccer game that win the game, where somebody has a burst, massive acceleration, and beats everybody. Those are the things we need to train.
Mhm. So, just to play devil's advocate here, I do want to get into the podcast you did with Joel Reinhardt and Andrew Cormier and some of the data that they collected in a soccer match. I think it was for men's college. So, I have some of the numbers here. So, they ran, most players ran 9 miles in the
Yep.
game. So, that was about 17,000 yards of running, and only 280 yards of that was sprinting. So a lot of coaches will argue, well, sprinting's just a tiny percentage of the game. What do you say to those coaches?
That's the perfect question, and I love the word counterintuitive. I gave like an entire presentation on the paradoxes of coaching, the intuitive. I don't even know if that's a word. The counterintuitive nature of training. So intuitive would mean they need to be prepared to run 9 miles,
Mhm.
and that's not dumb. That's what seems like we should be doing. But if you picture um, what a college athlete that runs 9 miles a day looks like, I don't think that's the soccer player you're after. They are, they look more like a marathon runner, and God bless marathon runners. Um, but they're 5'5" and they weigh 118 pounds or 106 pounds. That's when I see great soccer players in the men's or women's, they are strong, explosive. They look like they belong on a track team. Not not run the 2 mile. They belong on a 4x1 team. They are fast, explosive athletes. And when it's so cool that they had me on because I'm not a soccer person. I literally was probably the only American that did not watch 1 second of the World Cup. So all of your audience now is just turned off the podcast. But bear with me. They had me on because I don't think like other people, and we learn by cross pollination, not by getting in a silo, getting in an echo chamber. We learn by being challenged. So when they told me these things, very similar to your question, I asked, describe the best player on your soccer team. And they almost like smiled and looked at each other because they knew where I was going. They said, well, fast and explosive. I go, okay, so maybe we want to train what makes the best the best. Now, some people would still argue that fast and explosive is genetic and can't be trained. And you and I both know that's not true. Those same people will go in the weight room, and I'm like, excuse me, weight room guy, meathead, Neanderthal, whatever we want to call him. Is strength genetic? And they, well, yeah, but it's improvable.
Mhm.
Yes, it is. Okay, is speed genetic? Well, of course. I go, well, guess what? Speed is trainable too. We can move the needle on speed with every athlete. I would argue the slowest athletes, you can move the furthest. The ones that are super elite, like if you ever had a 20-mile-an-hour girl, you're going to see less gains with her than you will with that 15-mile-an-hour girl because she's already close to her ceiling, maybe. I would still argue if you could improve that 20 to a 21, you have like maybe the best in the world type of soccer player. You know, it's still important, even if it's a small game. Just like if you already have a strong athlete, you know, when you gain strength in the weight room, they're just stronger, which is sometimes pretty good. The weakest kids benefit the most in the weight room. The slowest kids benefit the most from speed training. So even though the requirements of the game require 9 miles, we need to train the important things, the things that win. And
Mhm.
then this is important. This is the name of my other talk this past weekend. Let the sport train the sport. You know how
Yes.
you get used to 9 miles of running? Not by running 9 miles. Play soccer. And we both know the kids play too much soccer. I mean, that's not the
Yeah.
problem.
So can I just jump in with some of the
Yeah,
data I've collected with my girls?
yeah,
You're going to just drop your jaw with this. So we've been using the Beyond Pulse chest strap GPS
yep,
sensor to look at some of my older girls. So we're talking 16 to 18-year-olds. And I look at just their training week. So they practice 3 times a week, some of them 4 times a week, and then they have 1 or 2 games on the weekend. It's a lot, but then when you actually look at the numbers, some of these girls are covering 20 to 30 miles a week of that light to moderate intensity work. So it's like, okay, they're already well prepared for that 9
over
miles in
prepared.
the game. Like they're overtrained in that sense.
Yeah.
And then I look at the high speed running, it is so tiny, and that just showed like they're not getting that speed stimulus. And then when we look at what happens in the game, they're only getting maybe 200, 300 yards of high speed running out of 17,000 to 20,000 yards. So just looking at that practice and game week, I was
Mhm.
absolutely floored, and it just reaffirmed why that speed training is so important in their schedule because they're getting enough of that running, that jogging and walking, and it's so much. It almost makes me think, when do we have time to train speed within the youth
Oh,
schedule if we have to train fresh?
yep.
So I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Well, three things popped into my mind. You know that when you let the game train the game, it's going to take care of capacity and endurance more than anything.
Mhm.
I think we would both agree the thing that's not trained in the game are those important qualities of speed and explosiveness. So what Mike Whiteman, a friend of both of ours, um, talks about, and I love this, is that we need to look at soccer kids as kind of like you know like stupid teenagers that don't eat right. Not I should say stupid, but you know teenagers that don't eat right. Well, if they're not getting certain nutrients, let's don't feed them more of the stuff they're getting. Let's supplement their diets with things that will matter. So, so if we look at, they're getting enough volume, as your numbers point out, during a soccer type week. Now we have to find ways to supplement, and he calls them apex predators, and I've
Mhm.
totally stolen that.
I love that term.
I love it because all it means is we want to be athletic athletes. I mean,
Mhm.
and I hate to say it, but endurance people are good at endurance. They're not super in what I think of athletic things. And that is sprint fast, lift heavy, jump high, jump far. And I've added another thing, that's bounce. I think bounce is like a reactive thing. And I think it's like, I think it's not the same as jumping. Jumping is more like power. And
Mhm.
I think that bounce is reactive. So my I go sprint fast, lift heavy, jump high and far, and bounce. Those are the four things they need supplemented on. Now, turning this all back to your question, when do we do this? I think we go back to our previous talk, and that is, when are they fresh? Hardly ever. Probably the best opportunity is the warm up.
Mhm.
But what do we do in the warm up? We literally get them semi fatigued in order to go into practice and prevent injury. But yeah, they still get injured because they're not used to high speed, high explosive things. So, what if we took that atomic workout and made that, replaced our worthless warm up with something that matters? And now and as you know, we don't need to train speed 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. 2 or 3 is all we need. So that would be the answer. But
Mhm.
I think we're asking the right questions. And to me, it seems, yes, it's counterintuitive, but to me, when you really look at it, it really makes sense.
It does, and I'm becoming more sold on that idea of putting it into the warm up because that youth schedule, it's so hard to even just find time, so it's almost like the onus is on the team coach to microdose that speed throughout the week. So for like a youth player who practices 3 times a week, they have a game on a Saturday or Sunday, would you recommend they start with just 1 time a week on that Tuesday and just slowly seeing how they adapt to that and then adding in that 2nd day during the season? Because
Yes.
sadly, we have to keep in mind, like, they also have skills trainers, they might be on their school team and their club team. So, it's a disaster, you know?
And I read something the other day that that like high school students now have a longer work week, even without sports, than their
Mhm.
parents have.
I
I mean,
believe that.
school and all the expectations for teachers to load homework on these kids, they their schoolwork blocks out the sun, and then we expect them to be semi-professional athletes on top of that. And so, yes, I think it's really difficult. I was going to tell you that there's a ton of feed the cats football coaches out there these days, and some of them have experimented with doing the atomic workout on game day.
Mm,
Like, what? Like, no, we have to be wait, ooh, what if we had a 15-minute, 60 seconds of work inside of a 15-minute workout or a 25-minute workout that actually primed the body, potentiated the body to do better things. And this is not new. Jimmy Radcliffe, probably the greatest S&C guy ever from Oregon, would do a neurological lift on the
mhm,
morning of a game. Oregon would play on Saturday afternoons. They'd come in and snatch 3 times, which is picking a bar. For those people that don't know, it's basically picking a bar up from the ground and explosively throwing it over your head. And he felt like that was the most neurological lift in the weight room, and it potentiated their nervous system to play well. And during those years where he was the S&C coach, Oregon scored about 50 points a game and set the standard for playing the fastest brand of football ever played. They never seemed tired. They're always fast, always explosive. They did no conditioning, none, but they were always fast. I mean, they were just primed and ready to go. So if the snatch is a great neurological event in a weight room, microdosed, wouldn't the most extreme CNS thing in the world, sprinting at full speed for a couple seconds, also work? And I would say yes. So I would say not only could we do it on practice days, but we could do it on game days too.
Mhm.
And then this is the time I wouldn't do it: after the weight room, after a game, because you're not fresh, the morning after a game, you're beat up, you are not ready. And so those are the times you can't do it. So I think as coaches, that's why I say you have to prioritize speed. And people hate that because they think that I'm saying nothing else matters. No, priority just means you work around that. Has to be a part of your program, and everything else works around that, because you have to be fresh when you work on speed. And and the great thing is that by prioritizing it, you take nothing away from anything else. Matter of fact, you'll make everything else better.
I like that idea of doing it before a game. I can see it being incredibly impactful. And that was one thing I actually did with your workouts is I did my speed before a lift or before me going out to play soccer. I wasn't sore. I was ready to go. It actually enhanced those
Yes.
things that I did afterwards. And I think coaches might argue, well, what about dynamic stretching? We don't want injuries. We need to stretch. And there's no stretching in the atomic workout, but I never felt sore or like I was going to pull a muscle.
No.
So what's going on with that? And what would you say to people who say, well, we need to do a dynamic stretch and Frankensteins and inchworms in our warm up on game day? This is just
That's
like so like counterintuitive to everyone
I
listening.
know, I know. This is down the rabbit hole stuff. But we haven't stretched in 25 years on my track teams. Uh,
I'm so glad you say that because I wrote about I'm like anti-stretching in my whole
yeah,
book. So
yeah. Now there is no doubt. I mean, my wife is at a yoga class, Zen yoga class right now, and stretching makes you feel better. And as you age and stiffen up, stretching is really good. There are chemicals that are released, calming chemicals when you stretch. But those calming chemicals also subtract some from twitchy, explosive things that athletes need to do. So, I mean, if you want a good night's sleep, maybe yoga is really good for you, but maybe not for a competition.
Mhm.
So, stretching is the elongation of a muscle. Muscles really don't elongate, and stretching does not prevent injury. Now, um, I'm wearing a shirt that says RPR right now. You know what does prevent injury is is RPR is based on reflexive performance reset. I saw Wisconsin's basketball team. I retweeted it last night. We're standing around before a game with a guy in the middle, and they were like
Yep.
torturing their ribs and torturing their sternum. That's a diaphragm thing, and then they belly breathe, and it allows you to belly breathe bigger. It declutters your brain. Your hamstring flexibility improves by 20 to 30%. Like just breathing. And then there's different acupressure points on the body that are like light switches that improve our ability to contract muscles. And so I know that sounds like voodoo, and it kind of is, but it's voodoo that works, and it's everywhere these days. And that really does, along with sprinting and high speed, high neurological things, those things do prevent injuries. So injury prevention is not something that we're reckless with. I mean, no. I mean, I've had one hamstring injury in the last 10 years. One. And they're, like I said, the Denver Broncos had 11 this year. I guarantee there's a couple things they're not doing. They're not sprinting enough, and they're not doing belly breathing type things. And those things really do improve performance and prevent injuries, which that would be really good.
I feel like this podcast is just going to confuse everyone.
Oh
They're just
God.
be like, I've never heard this stuff before, but it's
Yeah.
good. I mean, you have to really think outside the box and question things that you've been doing for many years. I know I have, and if you're not questioning, if you're not learning, then you're not growing as a coach, and we have to continue to find ways to grow and serve our players. Now, you did mention something earlier about how speed kind of like raises all the boats.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I love this because another thing that shocked me with this program is I thought, so I haven't done any like conditioning since I played 6 years ago. And I thought that when I returned to the game, I would be dead. I thought my lungs would be burning and my aerobic capacity would be awful. But I found that after a few months of doing the atomic workouts, it actually made me better in that area. So my first game back, I wasn't dying. I wasn't gasping for air, and I was shocked. Is this a normal thing? Is this something? Is there research behind it?
Oh my. Yeah, if people haven't already had their minds blown, yes. What you're experiencing, I need to tell you about 4 different things here. One is we do what we call a sprint capacity workout, where guys basically run 1040s timed in 10 minutes. I'll just leave it at that. What I've found is that every single time we do it with 10 guys at a time. The number 1 ranked guy in doing those 1040s is always the fastest guy. So speed creates capacity, which is a type of endurance. The slowest guy of the 10 is always the slowest guy. So the guy with the least capacity has the lowest average time. In speed endurance work, we don't call it speed endurance, we call it lactate work. The fastest guy always can sprint the furthest. The slowest guy gets tired first. So speed creates endurance and it creates capacity. You know how some of these teams have this, 1 mile run, as a conditioning test or a shuttle test, or 16 110s, which is 1 mile of like fast running. Well, Christian McCaffrey is trained by Brian Kula, and his off season does no endurance, no capacity work at all. All they do is 5-second work, 5 seconds, recover enough to have high outputs again. They do nothing to prepare for that stupid conditioning test. And believe it or not, NFL teams, several still do have stupid conditioning tests. Just because you're making millions does not mean you're not stupid. Matter of fact, I would argue there's possibly more stupid people at high levels than at the grassroots levels. So McCaffrey wins his conditioning tests. It should have killed him, but he wins the conditioning test. And that is because you become more athletic. So yes, speed is a tide that will lift endurance and capacity. Obviously, it lifts speed. It lifts, I believe you're more skilled the faster you are. The faster you are, the better you change directions. The better your, well, let me end with these 2 stories and end our statement here. Brian Kula trains other people. He trained a swim team this year, not in the water. He trained them like track athletes. He said that they were really bad at doing almost everything. But after 8 weeks, you get better. And they got faster and faster and faster. They set 48 swim records
Wow.
that season. Okay, so what in the world would sprint training on land do for swimmers? The nervous system. The brain controls all movement. If we get better at extreme movement, we get better at all movement. Then this is a killer too. He trained a very good young female golfer. She was, like teenager, traveling national tournaments. I mean, she's really, really good. And they never trained with the club. They trained sprint training, athlete training, high outputs, explosive, fast. Her club speed improved 7 miles an hour.
Wow.
Just think about that.
Wow.
She had the ability to swing her club faster. And so what I said, I'm talking to Les Bellman and Brian Kula, two rock stars of the world in terms of training athletes. I said, could it be that if we sprint train baseball players more, they may
Mhm.
retain their bat speed later into their career? They said, for sure. Well, guess what? The Willie Mays and Mickey Mantles of the world that lost their swing when they were like 38, what were they never doing? They were never sprint training, ever. They would run, they would maybe lift heavy things, but they lost their bat speed. And when you lose your bat speed, you can't play anymore. So, why did they didn't lose their bat speed because they got weak physically? You can be stronger at 40 than you were at 30, but your nervous system slows down. So that nervous system must be trained. How do we train it? Sprint.
Wow, those are some great stories with the swimmers and the golfer. That's just incredible. And now that you bring that up, I'm just thinking about some of my fastest girls who are over 18 miles per hour, and they never complain about their endurance. They plow through the whole game. They have more than enough energy in the final minutes or going into extra time, and there's really something to this when you look at people's numbers and the fastest athletes and the fruits of their labor, I guess you can say. But yeah, it's fascinating. But we still get pushback from the soccer community because they'll talk about the concept of max aerobic speed. Do you hear that a lot?
Yep.
So
I think it's in
what
some
are
textbook. It's in some textbook.
yeah.
You know
So
what I mean?
full disclosure, I've never used MAS, and I know like the soccer sports scientists and the EPL and on Twitter are gonna like get mad at me for it, but
Yes.
I work with youth and I'm not gonna measure that. And my fastest athletes have the most endurance, so I really don't know what to say. But and I know Mike Boyle hates on max aerobic speed a lot. So
Yes.
what are your thoughts on MAS now that we got everyone tuned into the discussion?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, this we're gonna get some hate letters, but that's okay.
We're an
You know,
hour in, so this is
oh my
concerning.
goodness. It's felt like 15 minutes. Um, the that whole thing, like I said, I think is in a textbook. And the stuff that I am saying and Brian Kula is saying and Les Bellman saying, like Les Bellman said that the Philadelphia Eagles don't say they feed the cats, but they pretty much are. There's more standing around at a Philadelphia Eagles practice than any other team in the NFL. And I think they're like 12-1 or something. It's really paid off. They've had no injuries. They compete at a high level. They don't fall apart in the fourth quarter because of lack of conditioning, even though they're not doing any conditioning. And so it's one of those things that I've fallen out of favor with Bill Maher in the last couple of years. But he used to say, "It may not be a fact, but I know it's true." Like I don't think I can. Sometimes people like, hey, I want to see the research papers that say what you're. I don't have any of those, and I can't read those damn things anyway. I mean, they're like over my head. I mean, those people don't talk. They don't talk like a high school chemistry teacher talks. At least a good high school chemistry teacher like I was, where they talk in simple terms that are easy. I just know it's true. It just happens over and over again that over conditioned teams still get tired.
I have a
Yeah.
question. So wouldn't so coming back to people who asked for the research studies, wouldn't your over 40 years of coaching and looking at the numbers
Mm.
be considered a research study?
Um, I, I think it makes my points valid,
Mhm.
or I think there's some validity to my points. But being a science person, I realize it's not been double blind tested. It's not been published and for peer review. The things that make science science. So I believe that what I have is anecdotal. What I have is a mountain of anecdotal evidence combined with all the people in this vast network that somehow I've found myself in the middle of in the last 10 years. just a mountain of anecdotal evidence that all comes back to the same conclusions, that we want fast, athletic, explosive athletes. And what's crazy is, I believe it's true even in endurance sports like cross country. I say let cross country train cross country. Away from cross country, let's make athletes. Let's have them throw med balls. Let's have them go over wickets. Let's have them jumping. Well, we don't jump when we run 5 miles, right? But the ability to jump will make you more efficient in those things. Athletes will become better at endurance because they're more athletic. So even in the ultimate endurance things, so the pushback from those people, and you need to realize this too, and no, you understand this totally, is that we're all tribal genetically. We all join groups for security and safety, even though the groups we join today do not improve our security and safety. Being a Republican or Democrat does not make us more likely to live to child producing years. Joining a church doesn't. It used to be if you didn't join the tribe, you would die in the woods. And if you're in the tribe, then you had the protection, physical protection of a group of people. So we are genetically geared to join groups. And I believe one of the biggest groups in the sports community is tradition. The soccer coach is going to feel more secure being traditional. And they find people like you and I who are questioning tradition to be threats, even though it's surely not a physical threat. Even if they join our little tribe, um, they're not going to like die in the woods, but still they have that DNA where they want to be traditional because they feel secure and nobody questions like your soccer team's not doing enough conditioning. Man, that destroys a soccer coach because that's traditional and they want to be a part of that tribe. So yeah, it's kind of like they will perceive these things as threats.
Yeah, it's as far as the tribes, I've seen like the speed-based people and then the endurance-based people in soccer, and they just kind of stay in their own camp. And I actually used to be in the endurance camp, but then I heard people like you and Mike Whiteman and Ken Clark, and I was like, okay, this might make a lot of sense, but I'm going to try this out and see what happens. And since then, I've never gone back, and
No.
I haven't done formal conditioning in forever. And I agree with you that the team coach, that's their job within the practices, the small sided games, and that kind of brings me to my next question. Should we speed train with or without the ball? Because I I get the soccer coaches saying, "Well, you got to train like speed dribbling on the ball and that's valuable." And my thought is, well, you can just accomplish that in a 1v1 drill. Um, and then you can train your absolute speed separately from that. But I think coaches have trouble like distinguishing the two, and they think everything needs to be done on the ball, everything needs to be sport specific. So, what are your thoughts on training speed with the ball?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect question. And I can just hear them saying that. And once again, that's intuitive. They're not dumb saying that they should train speed with the ball because that's what soccer is. But that goes back to my counterintuitive thing that says let the sport train the sport. Should they work with the ball at high speed? Heck yeah, of course. That's soccer. You you must train that. But then let's go back to the supplemental thing. What's wrong with only training with the ball? It's not fast enough. You're not improving your nervous system. You are not with the ball might be at 70% top speed or 60 or 50. Well, if you're not training extreme, you don't move the needle. So we must constantly work at sprinting faster as a supplemental thing to all sports. and then train the specifics in the sport. And, and this is another thing that confuses people. Like, we never run in a straight line. Why are we practicing in a straight line? They need to run curves and zigzags. That's what soccer, or that's what football is. Football says it's an acceleration sport. We're never at top speed. To all those people, and there's like a gazillion of them, you're right. Train those things as part of your sport. But you will never hit top speeds by zigzagging with the ball. you will never hit a top speed if all you're doing is 10-yard sprints. So yes, a 10-yard sprint might, or a curved sprint might be really good for training that sport, but it's not good at training the brain and the electrical system. I love the term. I just invented this term. We want lightning bolts in nanoseconds going to our muscles. Our muscles are dumb. Our brain is smart. We want lightning bolts in nanoseconds going to, and that what creates a very athletic, explosive, fast athlete. And as you know, what is the exact thing that's never done? That. We just don't. We train everything but the nervous system, and the brain always wins.
You're right that players there's no way they can reach that top MPH and improve
Yep.
that with the ball at their feet, or running a curved, or just a sprint that's not a straight line. And I think you'll find this funny. So this past weekend, I put one of my slower girls against one of my faster girls, and the faster girl had the ball at her feet. The slower girl was without the ball. The slower girl still won the sprint without the ball. And I just thought it was funny because we actually filmed it because I'm going to be presenting to coaches, but every single time the player with the ball is going to lose that race. And the miles per hour is just a huge difference. They're usually in the single digits on the ball, which is it's not enough. It's not enough to improve speed. And I just thought it was funny doing that drill and putting those two side by side.
That is the absolute perfect. I mean, yeah, you need to send me that video.
I'll
Uh,
post it on Twitter.
there you go. And I'll just copy it, and yeah, I'll try to remember to give you credit. But that is the perfect example. Um, Now, you probably were doing a really good thing for the slower girl because she was extremely sprinting in a straight line, hopefully with the wind, and like working on her nervous system. Whereas you're doing a disservice to the girl with the ball
Yep.
because there are no improvements. You say, well, that's good for her to work with the ball. Do that in soccer. Let's
Mhm.
do straight line sprinting with the wind. And if we can run on a track with spikes, that's even better because you're going to be more extreme in your speed in spikes on a hard surface, timed with the wind on a track, than you are soft shoes on turf with a ball, tired against the wind. You want to maximize. It's really pretty simple. You want to be as fast as you can be several times a week. Not by several, 3 to 6 times a week,
Mhm.
as fast as you can be. And you're only, by the way, like if you do the atomic workout and you're doing 2 sprints, you're at maximum velocity for about 4 seconds total. But that 4 seconds might be the most important thing you ever do.
Mhm.
It's weird.
It's crazy when you actually do it with your athletes. And I don't think many people try it out and observe what's really going on in the game and in these speed workouts. But one question I get a lot from coaches is, well, can we just kind of throw a ball out 40 yards out, have them sprint onto that, like make it more sports specific? Like I've heard that before
They
because
want
it's
to do
like,
that, don't they?
yeah, they do. And I think I forget who I was hearing on a soccer podcast. It was some other performance coach, but he was saying that we should make speed work sport specific because the brain's involved in the game, and you have to react running onto a ball or on a counter attack, and you have to like train your players for that. And I get that, and like you said, it's intuitive, and I understand, but you can train that in a 1v1, 2v2, 4v4 game on like a large pitch. Just make your pitch dimensions big. So I don't know. I see both sides that you can make that in a 1v1 drill of players sprinting to the ball 40 yards out and racing to it. But I don't know. Do you think that would get the same effect? Would the ball be a distraction?
No way would they be as fast.
Yeah, that's what I was
You
thinking.
know, I say,
Yeah.
uh, I remember Bush Exnader one time, the great speed coach, said, "If you're not wearing spikes, you're not sprinting." Um, I often say, if you're not timing, you're not sprinting.
Mhm.
Um, I think maybe you've seen this, that when we observe something closely, we change it. That's like a Heisenberg thing, you know, that when we observe the atom as scientists, the atom changes. So we're not really observing what the atom really is. It's a change. And I love using that metaphor with athletes, that if we time them, if we video them, or we have them compete, we change their speed. That they're just faster that way. Well, I would argue that maybe chasing a ball would improve their speed over just telling them to run from here to there. But if you're not timing kids, and if they're not getting that instant feedback, if they're not, chasing the rabbit of speed every day, or not every day, but a couple of times a week, they're just not getting it. And all those sport specific people, I not only understand what they're saying, I totally agree with them. Let the sport train the sport. But what I don't agree is if they say, no, we're not going to spike up and get on track and sprint a couple times a week. We're not going to do that, because then they're saying we don't care about having an advanced central nervous system. So that's where I can't agree with them.
So you're saying that it wouldn't harm them to do a 1v1 drill where they're racing to the ball, but they need to still have the sprint sessions, get the timing system out, record everything so that they're reaching that MPH. So you're not saying, get
100%.
rid of that stuff. Like you can do both, right?
For sure. And the terrible thing, and the thing that, as you know, 90 some percent of all soccer teams, all lacrosse teams, all football teams, all basketball teams, they're all doing the sport specific stuff fine.
Mhm.
Good job, guys. But away from the sport, S&C people are lifting them and doing conditioning on top of conditioning, and they're leaving out the most important thing, and that is an improved nervous system. So yeah, keep doing all those things, but prioritize speed when fresh, and just watch it change what you do.
Mhm. Wow, I think this discussion has been very powerful, and I'm sure it's going to make people think. And I know we could talk for hours, but I want to end with this. And you quote the book Essentialism a lot, and I absolutely love that book. So if you just want to finish with a quote from Essentialism and how it ties into what we should be doing with speed training.
Well, essentialism has changed a lot of lives. The book by Greg McKeon, um, and to me, it did not change my life at all. It just reaffirmed what I already was. I'm an essentialist. I'm a simplifier. I make fun of complexifiers, and some of the people at the highest positions in all professions are complexifying frauds. I, I've been lucky enough to in the last 10 years to be around some of the top people in the sports field, and the the number of frauds is very high. And so I think the essential quote from essentialism is do less and achieve more. Um, as soon as you say that, as soon as you say that our soccer practice is only going to be 90 minutes, as soon as you say that, you will make it better. Let's say it's a 3-hour practice. Nope, we're going to go 90 minutes from now on, because What are you going to cut out? You're going to cut out busy work. You're going to cut out low output stuff. You are going to run things through your brain and say, what things can go? I'm about ready to run into that problem with my book. It's kind of turning into War and Peace, um, and and I realize that I'm going to have to throw a lot overboard to make it a good book. I must turn a 500-page book into a 200-page book, and the reason why that book will now be better is I'm not going to throw away the best parts. I'm going to throw away the worst parts. Whenever we condense, whenever we say I'm going to do less, but I'm going to make it better, that's what we do. So that flies in the face of hard work. Like if you fail, what are we taught? Work harder. If you lose, we're going to work harder. We're going to practice more. It's always more, 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 more. And essentialism says no. You're going to practice less and do it better. And I just in love with all those concepts, whether it's the classroom, writing a book, the length of a practice. That as we cut things down, we make them better.
I hope you guys found that powerful, and please check out the book Essentialism. Tony's right. It's changed my life. It's changed his life and so many other people. And it's just so good for the quality and productivity of your work and your craft. So please check that out. I'll link it below in the caption. And then Tony, you said that you're writing a book. So what's it called again? Tired is the enemy?
It's like everything else that evolves. It's called Feed the Cats, Tired is the Enemy. And then I've added the thing, the evolution of a high school coach and his evolutionary approach. So that's like the whole thing, and
Okay.
it's been in the works for 18 months. I haven't written a word in the last 5 weeks because I've had 5 big events that I'm a part of in the last 5 weeks. But more and more, I'm thinking, to go along with what I just said, instead of writing more, I need to start throwing stuff overboard and start moving it away. And it's going to be like losing your own kids or something, because you become so attached to these things you've written. But that's what I'm going to do, and I hope to have it published sometime in 2023.
Awesome. So, guys, be sure to follow up with Tony. It's going to be an amazing book, I'm sure. And I'll link his Twitter and his website in the caption below. And just to do a plug on his remote training, just so awesome. Such a great experience for me. And Tony is super accessible throughout the program, and the coaching is incredible, and you submit your videos as you go, and he'll give great feedback on all your sprint drills. So I highly recommend if you're looking to improve your speed, but just keep in mind those workouts are going to be shorter than you expect, but incredibly beneficial for you. So Tony, thank you again for coming on and just shocking the world with this.
Well, yeah, I think what we've said is going to get some blowback on us, but it'll be good stuff. It will be good stuff that we're ready to handle. So, Erica, thank you so much, and look forward to talking again.
Thank you so much. And guys, I'll see you on next week's episode.